The Last of Us Part 2 trailer opens with this shot here. It's simple, a direct continuation of the infamous sequence from the first trailer. We get this line.
How would you rate our kiss from last night?
And for what it is, I think this line is a fairly good verbal embodiment of what The Last of Us Part 2 seems to be, and more importantly, what it absolutely has to be. The Last of Us Part 2 is a swan song for the PS4, a system that has seen countless classics, incredible exclusives, and importantly, has dominated for years. This game is launching at the very end of its life in the exact same way the original Last of Us did. That isn't coincidence. Naughty Dog is putting this game in a position where it almost has to succeed, but I find myself wondering, why name the game The Last of Us Part 2? Why not name it The Last of Us 2, setting it up as a traditional sequel? Well, I actually think that this most recent trailer, and really everything we've seen about this game, separates itself from what you normally see out of a sequel. Let me explain. We've completely overhauled our engine, developed new combat mechanics, created a new analog stealth system, and revamped our animation system to fully express Ellie's desperation, resourcefulness, and unique agility. That is a direct quote from Neil Druckmann, and I think it sets the stage perfectly for this piece. By the time The Last of Us Part 2 releases in February, it will have been in development for 6 years, having begun its dev cycle in 2014. In those 6 years, we've gotten this, and this. That is to say that gaming has grown and changed in those 6 years. This is a game that Naughty Dog was unsure they would create, a game that most people were unsure whether or not they even wanted, given the near unanimous acclaim of the original game. And yet, the team believed they had a story that needed to be told. And that story is exactly what Naughty Dog has been placing front and center. Last of Us Part 2 isn't afraid of controversy, almost to the point where it's become near comical. The game, the developers seem to be breathlessly unafraid of putting their most divisive foot forward. And that's not only refreshing, but a direct indication of the kind of quality we may be able to expect from the game come launch. There's a trend within media that seems to be worsening, that Last of Us seems to be avoiding. Writers and creators are afraid to be themselves, to take a side and truly explore their vision. They remove, they censor, they run from things that may turn off a portion of their consumer base. What Naughty Dog seems to be saying with 2 trailers and their direct quotes is that they have placed a primary focus on Ellie's relationship and emotions, and that they're telling the story they intend to tell through and through. What to the most outraged looks on the surface like bait seems more like a genuine attempt to express the polarity of this game's story. Ellie is now in a position where she's old enough to discover who she is, to understand peace, to find happiness in others, and that juxtaposes the chaos and anarchy of the world around her. And yes, I'm aware that's basically the back-of-the-box elevator pitch, but this much is obvious. What I think is less obvious is the way Naughty Dog has chosen to portray the game in both of their trailers. They start and end with Ellie interacting with someone she appears to love. With Joel returning to end this particular trailer, I think that this is Naughty Dog displaying an acute understanding of what worked with the first game and sending a message to gamers that the focus on relationships and character isn't going anywhere, even if you don't like it. It's the very structure holding together everything you've seen through the middle of these trailers, the gameplay. And let's talk about that, because I'm already seeing the concerns pop up online, and almost all of them are not substantiated by what we've seen. And this is where we get into Last of Us status as a sequel. The original Last of Us was Naughty Dog's attempt to take what worked so well from a gameplay perspective in Uncharted and synthesize that into a more grounded, less optimistic experience. They didn't just succeed, they managed to do what very few games can. Create a gameplay experience that feels like a natural extension of the game's environment and story. And yet, within 20 minutes of the trailer being live, people were already upset about how similar the gameplay looked to the original game. To all of those people, and I assume Naughty Dog, have a simple message. That is the point. Neil Druckmann early on said Ellie would have an NPC companion in the game, lending itself to comparisons to the original. But the big concern with The Last of Us Part 2 was that the game didn't really need a sequel, and pulling one off was going to be near impossible, especially if they were attempting to replicate its formula. And yet, in just 30 or so seconds of gameplay, the game managed to justify its existence as a third-person shooter. How? By appearing to be everything that worked the first time while also utilizing every bit of technology at their disposal. Surprisingly, replicating success appears to be a pretty good way to succeed. The original Last of Us was built on last-gen tech and was functional in that architecture, but now we have what appears to be the same third-person mechanics, sway and all, mixed with an already enhanced enemy variety, larger environments, prettier destruction effects, and importantly, what appears to be the same, albeit likely enhanced, gameplay loop. Naughty Dog has said the AI has been rebuilt to be smarter and adaptable. Better yet, Ellie is much more maneuverable. She can go prone, hide under cars, and according to the team, she now has new dodge mechanics to avoid melee attacks that shift and change based on the weapon you're carrying, thus creating a layer of strategy. And even in the small touches, if you're shot with an arrow, like here in the trailer, you can keep fighting, but it will affect your movement and aim. You have to actually take cover and actively choose to remove that arrow. In order to be as good as the original, it needed to be nothing more than really more of that experience. And Naughty Dog has showed just enough to make it seem as though that's exactly what we're going to get. But does that mean the game will be a success? How do you quantify or even qualitatively approach assessing the follow-up to a near masterpiece? As I already mentioned, gaming has changed rather dramatically since the original Last of Us released. Multiplayer gaming's dominance has grown. Sports games riddled with microtransactions are the new normal, and releases almost never launch without ways to bring in substantial money for years. The games we get excited about in 2019 seem to be games like Anthem, and we see how the market and developers respond once they hit store shelves. But there's a bit of the God of War effect going on here. People seem to be surprised by that game's sales success, and there's a simple reality lurking behind The Last of Us Part 2 that's quite similar. If it's great, it will sell. That's what great games do. Sell. It's really that simple. Publishers and developers have created the status quo of multiplayer gaming, not gamers. Gamers have been and will continue to be happy with single-player experiences for as long as developers are happy making them, and publishers like Sony aren't too worried about reaching further into gamers' pockets, and continue to give developers a chance to create those isolated experiences. But while Last of Us Part 2's focus is on that single player, there's one lingering question that anyone who really played the original desperately wants answered. In its pursuit of replication, is there going to be multiplayer in the sequel? Or better yet, should there be? The original Last of Us featured one of the best multiplayer communities of last generation, and it bled into the current gen as well with a remastered release. It took the tension and the atmosphere of the campaign and applied it to a team-based multiplayer suite that required communication, resourcefulness, and surprisingly, an understanding of the game's survival mechanics. You could craft, heal, and thrive if you knew what you were doing. In fact, the multiplayer offering is so good, and was so good, that people are still playing it 6 years later. We don't know what the multiplayer Part 2 will look like, we just know that it exists. But if Naughty Dog continues and maintains the mantra of attempting to sustain the mechanical essence of the original game through its online presence, the game will live a substantially longer life than most people will expect it to. But what does all this mean for the original question I posed? There is absolutely no way of knowing whether or not The Last of Us Part 2 is going to be great. There's no way of knowing if it will launch as a finished product. There's no way of knowing much of anything as it stands today, but the one thing that has become abundantly clear, at least to me, is that Naughty Dog seems to be approaching an era of success that's built around an understanding of their consumers and their art that is so rare today. There's a reason that The Last of Us Part 2 isn't called The Last of Us 2, and I think I understand now more than ever why that decision was made. Originally, I kind of assumed that it was a borderline pretentious move to separate the title from the assumptions and generalizations that people make about sequels, especially in gaming. But this most recent reveal felt like it was more of a natural decision. This doesn't feel like a sequel. It's not being marketed like one. It doesn't look like one. It looks like an extension of something that already exists, a continuation, a natural bit of closure to unanswered questions. These trailers aren't bringing you in like this is a new release, they're bringing you in as though you're starting in media res on a story that you already have interest in. So many sequels in pursuit of higher cliffs and bigger sales adapt and also revolutionize what worked in the first place, and in some ways foundationally change what that was. The Last of Us Part 2 looks like it belongs side by side with what we've already gotten. And I think that's the best compliment I could pay a sequel, especially before we get our hands on it. Very few games, specifically sequels, deserve the benefit of the doubt based on trailers and quotes in the modern AAA space. But if anyone's earned a chance to revisit something so beloved, so important as The Last of Us, it's the people that seem to know that 2 is only better than 1 when they stick together.
You think I'd let you do this on your own?
Guys, that is it for today's video, and as always, I want to know what you think. What do you think of the trailers you've seen? Are you excited about The Last of Us Part 2? Are you excited that it is a seeming extension of 1 in almost every way? Or did you want to see something a little bit new, a little bit, I guess, well, what you can refer to as a revolution of The Last of Us? Let me know what you think down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, press the like button down below, and if you haven't yet done so, press subscribe. I put out more and more videos each and every week. They kind of come when they come, but hit subscribe and you won't miss any of those. Also hit the little bell next to the subscribe button. That just makes sure you don't miss anything that I upload. You actually get notified when I upload, which is really important. So press the little bell if you're gonna press subscribe. Helps out me and it helps out you. As a little aside, I just want to be clear with you guys, I wasn't super stoked about the whole State of Play event recently. I think PlayStation continues to do these things and they don't really have a lot to say or a lot to show. They just want to make a big event out of like one thing, and they feel like they need to fill more time by throwing a bunch of other stuff in there. I'm not even sure what that game was that opened the State of Play. I don't think anybody is. And a lot of the stuff that was in there really felt like they were just kind of small things that would have normally gone on the PlayStation blog, but eventually made it into the State of Play. Things like the PlayStation Plus lineup for October. I think that was a little bit strange. That really didn't need to be there. And I feel like if PlayStation's going to skip E3, I know they're holding out. They don't want to say anything until next year when they announce the PS5. But I feel like if you don't have much to say, just don't have much to say. Just release the Last of Us trailer and be done with it instead of, you know, forcing people to sit through 18 minutes of whatever that really was. So anyways, just thought I'd put that out there. Those of you asking what I thought of State of Play, that's what that is. And until next time, guys, I'm out.